The price of selling yourself to work can sometimes be this tragic. A young pharmacist named Kanji Yakutani spent his life in the laboratory of molecular pharmacology. His motivation came from a painful past. His little sister had died from a brain tumor that could not be completely removed. Carrying that loss, Kanji devoted himself to research, determined to save patients who shared the same fate. But even scientists are only human. After endless hours of work, he set his alarm and closed his eyes for a quick nap. When the alarm rang, Kanji never woke up again. He had died from overwork. When he opened his eyes once more, he found himself in another world. Standing before him was a maid named Charlotte Soller, or simply Lotta. She called him young master and told him to rest after being struck by lightning. Looking at his body, Kanji realized he had been reborn into a boy named Pharma de Medicis. Lotta introduced herself again and helped him remove the bandages. On his arm was a strange mark resembling the holy crest of the medicine god Dionysus, also known as the god of healing. Pharma dismissed it, claiming it was only a burn from lightning. Lotta then explained that she served the de Medicis family, one of the most prestigious noble houses of the Saint-Fleuve Empire, known for serving as royal pharmacists for centuries. Pharma's father, Bruno de Medicis, was a duke and the headmaster of the Royal Pharmacy School. His mother's name was Beatrice, his younger sister Blanche, and his older brother Blali studied far away at Nova Live University, the most prestigious academy in the world. Bruno expected his children not only to master pharmacy, but also to wield divine arts, a type of magic believed to be a gift from the gods. Yet, along with his memory loss, Pharma seemed to have forgotten his water element, divine arts. Lotta was shocked, since Pharma had once been very skilled. She warned that without divine arts, he could be stripped of his title and expelled from the family. Pharma returned to his room and tried to practice. The mark on his arm glowed. He created water from his hand, but could not stop it until he accidentally spoke the words, "Stop." Later, he discovered that his left hand could create compounds, while his right hand could erase them, as long as he understood their chemical structure. At the family library, Lotta reminded him that he had memorized every book since childhood, under his father's orders. Pharma tried to recover his memories while reading. That evening, at the family dinner, Bruno tested him by asking how to make a healing ointment called Giorid. Thanks to Lotta's warning, Pharma answered correctly, easing his father's worries. Relieved, Bruno told him he would resume lessons with his tutor, Eleonore, a brilliant former student of his. The next day, Eleonore noticed that Pharma now addressed her more formally, unlike before. After hearing about the lightning strike and memory loss, she understood. That day, she began teaching him divine arts. She explained that nobles are born with innate talents and guardian deities. Both Bruno and Blali were blessed by the medicine god, and so was Pharma. Eleonore, however, was blessed by the water god. She described the 5 elemental attributes: fire, water, wind, earth, and non-elemental, each divided into yin and yang. Pharma asked if someone could use an element outside their natural affinity. She replied, no, that was impossible, unless one was a god or a monster. Pharma was stunned. By the lake, Eleonore noticed Pharma lacked a holy staff, an item that amplifies divine arts. She lent him hers and demonstrated how to form a water spear. When Pharma tried, his power far exceeded hers, and he did so without chanting. Shocked, Eleonore tested his strength with a magic measuring rod, but it shattered instantly. Unable to gauge his power, even the staff could not identify whether his element was yin or yang. Eleonore examined him closely and saw the holy crest of the medicine god on his arm. Stunned, she warned him never to reveal this, not even to his father. Pharma promised to keep it secret. On their way back, they rested on a bench. Pharma playfully suggested Eleonore make a telescope with her fingers, and surprisingly, she saw more clearly. When Pharma tried the same, he noticed her sprained finger glowing green. As he analyzed it, the glow turned white. He explained that he could see illnesses in green, and when he focused on the cause, it turned white. Eleonore was shaken, realizing this ability resembled the divine eye of the medicine god, a power said to belong only to the gods. Then came the most terrifying discovery. Eleonore looked down and realized that Pharma had no shadow. Horrified, she fled, leaving the boy alone. The next morning at the mansion, Bruno told Pharma that Eleanor had requested to stop tutoring him due to a high fever and even wanted to quit altogether. Surprised by this decision, Bruno asked Pharma if he knew the reason. Pharma said he didn't, though deep down he remembered how she had been shocked and fled the day before. Bruno then handed him medicine and a letter, asking him to deliver them to Eleanor. Before leaving, Pharma examined the formula his father had written. Realizing it was no more than a simple nutritional drink, he adjusted it into something more effective. When he arrived, he gave Eleanor the letter, along with his improved fever remedy and an ointment for her sprained finger. Still shaken, she feared it might be poison, since she knew his secret. Pharma reassured her, saying he wanted her to remain his tutor. Eleanor was shocked, believing he no longer needed to study because he was the very embodiment of the medicine god. But after hearing Pharma explain that the family library contained nothing about divine arts and that he needed her guidance to control his powers, she finally agreed to return. The next day, Eleanor had recovered. Before beginning the lesson, she thanked Pharma, admitting his bitter medicine and ointment had worked wonders, much better than Bruno's prescription. She then took Pharma to an uninhabited island for training, in case his powers spiraled out of control. As expected, Pharma's strength far exceeded anyone's imagination. Though he still struggled to control it, Eleanor persisted in guiding him, determined to help him master his abilities. When Pharma returned home, he was greeted by the maid Madeline. With his divine eye, he immediately saw she was suffering from acid reflux. Looking around, he realized nearly all the servants had health problems. Whispering to himself, Pharma admitted his existence was strange. No shadow, divine powers far beyond normal humans, making him an easy target for kidnapping or assassination. Yet instead of retreating, he began preparing medicines for them one by one. After finishing, he gave a bottle to Lotta and explained how to use it. She was delighted, planning to share it with her mother, whose skin had grown rough from constant contact with water. Pharma then crafted remedies for each servant based on their conditions. When Madeline received hers, she broke down in tears, thanking him since no servant had ever been given medicine before. Lotta explained that Bruno, as a noble pharmacist, only served the aristocracy and never cared for household staff. Hearing this, Pharma was disheartened, realizing that social status decided who received treatment. He vowed to provide medicine to everyone in need, no matter their rank. A few days later, Pharma noticed his little sister Blanche absent from dinner. It turned out she had caught chickenpox, and Bruno ordered everyone to stay away from her for 3 weeks. Soon after, he left for urgent business, coughing and clearly unwell himself. That night, Pharma sneaked into Blanche's room. Frightened, she warned that their father would scold them, but Pharma reassured her and offered medicine. She refused at first, saying it was too bitter, so Pharma cleverly mixed it with a macaron for her to eat. Blanche was shocked. Her father had told her there was no cure. Pharma explained that the remedy was written in a new medical text, but their father was likely too busy to read it yet. He asked her to keep it secret and warned her not to scratch her skin, or the illness could spread. When Blanche asked, "What is a virus?" Pharma described it as tiny, invisible evil spirits. She then remarked that her brother had truly changed. Before, he never cared for her or played with her. Now, she had come to love this new brother deeply. Pharma stayed silent, remembering his late sister from his previous life. Days later, Bruno was stunned to see Blanche recover so quickly. That evening, Pharma retreated to the laboratory, reflecting that his powers were far too great for a mere human. He could create and erase matter, diagnose illnesses with his left hand, and see even deeper with his right. He wondered if this was connected to the fact that he had once died. In the end, he succeeded in creating a simple microscope lens, allowing him to observe bacteria without using his powers. Just as he prepared to show Blanche, his father suddenly called for him. An urgent summons had arrived from the royal palace. After asking about the summons to the palace, Pharma's father, Bruno, revealed troubling news. Her Majesty's health had suddenly declined. Seeing his father still coughing, Pharma tried to use his divine eye to check his condition, but Bruno turned around just as he was about to activate his power. At the royal palace, a healer named Claude anxiously reported that the queen's lungs were weakening further. The room was crowded with nobles and attendants, all concerned about Queen Elizabeth II's condition. Bruno entered to examine her, with Pharma following close behind. Pharma was surprised to see his father skillfully prepare an anesthetic, instructing the queen to inhale it for relief. Yet Pharma realized the medicine could only ease her suffering. It would not cure her illness. He even overheard Claude whispering to call a priest, believing tomorrow might be the queen's last day. To everyone else, it was simply a ritual to let her pass peacefully, but Pharma's divine eye revealed the truth. The queen was suffering from lung cancer, known here as the White Death. Without syringes, oral medicine was the only option, but creating such a drug was extremely complex, and a single mistake could cost her life. As he debated what to do, the queen's son Louis appeared, his face clouded with grief. Seeing that sorrow, Pharma could no longer hold back. With respect, he stepped forward and begged permission to attempt treatment with a new medicine he had developed. Bruno immediately ordered his son to stand down, declaring that no one could save the queen. But the queen herself stopped him, granting Pharma permission to proceed. In a locked chamber, Pharma began preparing the drug. Bruno, furious, tried to break in, warning his son to abandon this reckless idea. Bursting through the door with magic, he scolded Pharma. To Bruno's surprise, his son had correctly identified the White Death as well, proving his medical insight even without the divine eye. But Bruno warned him. No patient had ever been cured of this disease, and attempting to treat it only prolonged their suffering. Pharma stood firm, insisting he would try. Bruno, shaken, raised his staff as if to strike, but Pharma calmly erected a magical barrier. Bruno was stunned. His son had cast it without a staff, without even chanting. Pharma handed him a notebook, explaining that the knowledge came to him in a vision after being struck by lightning. When Bruno saw the divine mark on his son's arm, he realized Pharma had received revelation from the medicine god himself. Pharma promised that if the treatment succeeded, he wished to raise his father's honor at court. But Bruno refused, teaching him that a true pharmacist must take full responsibility for their own work. After all, the queen had entrusted her life to Pharma alone. That was both the duty and pride of a healer. Finally, Pharma completed the drug and entered the queen's chamber wearing a mask. Claude tried to stop him, but the queen herself scolded Claude and ordered Pharma to proceed. Bruno reassured Claude as well, saying he trusted his son's ability. Before administering the medicine, Pharma showed the queen a sample of her sputum under a simple microscope lens he had crafted. She was astonished by the strange, tiny creatures she saw. Pharma explained, these were the bacteria responsible for the White Death. If she took the medicine faithfully for 6 months, she could fully recover. He then asked the queen to drink the medicine, vowing to supervise her treatment every day, even if it cost him his life. Turning to the others, Pharma announced that if this medicine worked, the White Death would no longer be an incurable curse. People would no longer need to fear it. Excited whispers filled the chamber, some praising his miracle as divine. But Pharma clarified, this was not divine magic, but science, and he would gladly share the design for his microscope with them. On the way home, Bruno glanced at his son in silence. He realized he had always taught Pharma to show compassion for patients, yet had rarely done so with his own child. For the first time, he thanked his son and praised his extraordinary talent. Pharma, humbled, admitted that while his knowledge was vast, he still didn't know how to face patients at death's door as calmly as his father. That's why, as a true pursuer of medical science, he asked Bruno to continue guiding him. Touched by his son's sincerity, Bruno agreed. 3 months after the royal summons, Bruno informed Pharma that a representative from Nova Leone University had arrived, demanding the de Medicis family reveal the formula for the cure to the White Death. Bruno refused, insisting it was a miracle from the medicine god, not something to be taught, but Pharma thought differently. He declared the medicine could be created without divine arts, and one day he would share the method with the world. To him, knowledge was meant to be shared so that science could advance and save more lives. Bruno was shocked by his son's resolve, but warned him such ideals would draw enemies, even those who wished him dead. He revealed that certain factions had deliberately spread the disease inside the palace to weaken the queen's rule. At the palace, Prince Noah greeted Pharma warmly and whispered that the queen had prepared a gift for him. When asked what he wanted, Pharma innocently replied, "Nothing." Noah burst out laughing, calling him a fool for not asking for gold, land, or titles. But Pharma spoke honestly. His true wish was to open a pharmacy that would provide safe, affordable medicine for everyone regardless of social status. Later, after taking her medicine, the queen praised its remarkable effects. Pharma gently reminded her no drug could cure all illnesses, and the future was always uncertain. The queen raised an eyebrow, recalling that he had once boldly promised to cure her before Claude and the royal doctors. Pharma smiled and admitted those words were meant to give her hope. He then encouraged her. The empire needed her, Prince Louis needed her, and her existence remained invaluable. The queen smiled, touched by his sincerity, though a little puzzled by the depth of his words. Months passed, and with the queen's full recovery, a grand ceremony was held. Bruno was awarded the territory of Mosire for his lifelong dedication, and Pharma, officially named Royal Pharmacist of the Empire, was granted the right to open a pharmacy in the capital. The very next day, royal envoys arrived to help him build it. Pharma was caught off guard, but the queen's orders left no time to hesitate. Eleanor joined as well, asking what kind of pharmacy he envisioned. Pharma admitted he hadn't decided yet, wanting first to visit other shops for inspiration. A messenger named Don reminded him that they needed clear instructions, otherwise construction would stall. With Eleanor's reassurance that the queen would allow redesigns later if needed, the first blueprints were completed. Soon the pharmacy neared completion. Don thanked Pharma for his detailed plans, which had sped up the work. When asked what to name it, Pharma considered using de Medicis, but hesitated. As he mumbled to himself, Don misunderstood and christened it Pharmacy of Another World. A signboard was carved immediately. When Eleanor came to see the store, she praised the new name, while Pharma awkwardly explained it was all a misunderstanding. Not long after, a wealthy middle-aged man entered the shop. Introducing himself as Veron, head of the Signfield Pharmacists Guild, he sneered that a pharmacy run by a boy should stick to selling candy. Eleanor bristled, ready to lash out, but Pharma calmly replied, "You're right, I'll sell candy, cough drops that taste sweet and heal at the same time." Pharma asked if he needed to join the guild to operate. Veron answered that nobles weren't accepted, but he might consider it. He hinted the guild didn't sell expensive drugs like Pharma surely would, but Pharma denied it immediately. His pharmacy would sell affordable medicine. Tension filled the room until Veron left, leaving behind an uneasy silence. That afternoon at the estate, the servants sadly reported that Cedric, the longtime butler, planned to retire due to his bad knee. Knowing Cedric still wished to work if he could, Pharma invited him to become the accountant for his pharmacy. Bruno agreed, and Simon presented Pharma with a chest of gold, seed money for his very first shop. At last, Pharma's dream of opening his own pharmacy had become reality. After a few days, Pharma's pharmacy finally opened its doors, but instead of admiration, many people scoffed, saying it was nothing more than a spoiled noble kid wasting his parents' money. A month later, the results were disappointing. Eleanor explained that commoners usually went to shops that catered specifically to them, while nobles preferred to summon private healers at home. This made Pharma start thinking seriously about how to attract customers. That's when Lotta brought good news. She had distributed surveys around the capital and collected 100 responses. The results were eye-opening. People were too intimidated to visit because of the royal crest hanging at the entrance, afraid of speaking to a noble, worried about not having the right clothes, scared off by the guards at the door, and doubtful that a 10-year-old could really be a pharmacist. Cedric suggested posting the prices and consultation fees outside, but Lotta reminded them that many citizens couldn't read, so they'd need other solutions. Just then, their regular customer Demay returned to buy more sea candies. Pharma noticed he always bought the same thing and guessed he might be a sailor, since the candies were rich in vitamin C and prevented scurvy. Demay didn't answer and hurried off. Not long after, Pharma spotted Demay chatting with two familiar figures, his parents, Bruno and Beatrice, who had disguised themselves to secretly check out the shop. Bruno asked for a tour, and Pharma gladly showed him around. The first floor held the counter, a compounding room, and a waiting area. The second floor had treatment rooms with 4 beds and an isolation ward. The third floor housed staff quarters with a kitchen, and the fourth was a laboratory. Bruno praised the setup, but wondered why there weren't more customers. Pharma admitted he was still figuring out how to make people feel comfortable coming in. Beatrice suggested branching into cosmetics. If nobles loved them, commoners would soon follow. Bruno agreed, but warned against selling whitening powders, since many contained toxic substances like lead and mercury. Right at that moment, alarming news arrived. Lady Chloe, daughter of Marquis de Chatillon, had suddenly collapsed. Pharma rushed to her side. Using his divine eye, he discovered she wasn't sick at all, just weakened by infected cuts on her arms. She had been practicing bloodletting, hoping to lighten her skin to impress someone she admired. Pharma explained the danger of such methods, gave her iron syrup and antibiotics, and urged her to stop using harmful whitening powders. But Chloe burst into tears, saying she couldn't give up her dream of beauty. Encouraged by Lotta, Pharma decided to create safe cosmetics. A week later, Chloe returned to the pharmacy. Pharma tested his new line, moisturizer, sun protective foundation with titanium oxide, and a shimmering powder that made her face glow like snow in the morning sun. Chloe was delighted. Pharma also reminded her to cleanse and care for her skin daily so her natural beauty would shine through. From then on, cosmetics became the pharmacy's new highlight. Lotta carried baskets of products through the streets, promoting them as safe, affordable, and Noble approved. Each package even came with illustrated instructions, so even those who couldn't read could use them. The products became an instant hit. The shop was packed, and Chloe herself sometimes couldn't get her hands on them because they sold out so quickly. With demand skyrocketing, Chloe suggested creating a dedicated cosmetics company. She even offered to finance it and recruit experienced female pharmacists who had left the workforce after childbirth. With Cedric handling administration, Pharma agreed. Before long, a second branch called Medique was established, specializing in cosmetics. Later, when Pharma presented a new lipstick to the Queen, she was thrilled but also concerned. It was dangerous for a single shop to monopolize such important products. To ease her worries, Pharma agreed to place the company under the supervision of the state. One day, the de Medicis family traveled to Mosiré, the port territory granted to Bruno and Pharma by the Queen after they successfully cured her illness. Mosiré wasn't just a bustling trade hub. It was also the empire's largest supplier of medicinal herbs, making it invaluable to any pharmacist. While Bruno was in a meeting reviewing 5 years of trade reports, he received troubling news. An East India company from the Kingdom of Nederland had been dodging taxes. Calm but firm, Bruno instructed his subordinates to renegotiate shipping fees to stabilize trade. In the middle of the discussion, Pharma entered the room. Seeing him, Bruno's aide suggested he visit Mosiré's famous beach. Before leaving, Bruno warned his son never to swim alone in the sea. At the shore, Pharma spotted Blanche playing in the sand with Lotta. Blanche begged her brother to let her swim and promised she wouldn't go too far. Though reluctant, Pharma eventually gave in. Strolling along the beach, he unexpectedly saw Eleanor preparing to swim. Watching Blanche in the water, he was suddenly reminded of his sister from his previous life, who longed to swim but was held back by illness. Then disaster struck. Blanche was swept away by strong waves. Panicking, Pharma dove into the sea to rescue her. In his desperation, an overwhelming power awakened within him. He unknowingly created a stretch of dry land in the middle of the ocean, splitting the water apart and saving Blanche from drowning. Eleanor, who witnessed the entire scene, was left speechless by the sheer force of his ability. Safely back on shore, Pharma checked his sister with his divine eye and was relieved to see she hadn't swallowed much water. Still, guilt consumed him for allowing her into the sea. Eleanor gently reassured him that he had done the right thing. That night, Pharma lay awake, haunted by the realization that if he had tried to erase the water molecules a moment too late, he might have erased both Blanche and Eleanor, whose bodies also contained water. He finally understood why people might fear such overwhelming power. Lotta approached him hesitantly, confessing that she had been terrified when she saw his magic earlier. Pharma smiled softly and told her he only wished she wouldn't fear him, because to him, she was family. Touched by his words, Lotta teared up with gratitude. Meanwhile, at a distant church, a high priest named Salomon received reports from an orphanage in Mosiré. Witnesses claimed a boy with no shadow had parted the sea. Skeptical at first, the church sent an investigator who confirmed traces of unusual magic. Convinced, Salomon ordered his follower Joseph to spread the word across all parishes of the Saint-Fleuve Empire. They must track down and eliminate this non-human boy. After the family's holiday in Mosiré, Pharma returned to the capital and found his pharmacy busier than ever. Yet, he noticed two suspicious men lurking nearby. Eleonore warned they looked like priests from a foreign church. Shortly after, Bruno was informed that a carriage had rammed into the pharmacy, endangering lives. Furious, he declared this a direct act of hostility against the de Medicis family. When asked who might be behind it, Pharma immediately thought of Veron, the head of the Pharmacists' Guild, and those white-robed strangers, but he kept silent without evidence. The next morning, Pharma rushed to the pharmacy and found the place wrecked. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Cedric explained he had already sent Eleanor and Lotta with backup supplies to the Medique branch so customers wouldn't be turned away. Suddenly, Dame appeared with a group of young men eager to help rebuild, all because they loved the sea candy Pharma had made. Soon, more townsfolk gathered to lend a hand. In the middle of the cleanup, a woman arrived in distress, pleading with Pharma to save her father, who had collapsed from heat stroke. Urged by everyone to go, Pharma grabbed his medical kit and followed her into the countryside. But as they reached a deserted meadow, the woman vanished. Before he could react, Pharma found himself surrounded by white-robed figures led by Salomon. At that moment, he realized he had walked straight into a trap. Salomon confronted Pharma, confirming he was the boy his subordinates had reported. He revealed that he and his men were inquisitors from the Banach Teo diocese, the most powerful religious order in the San Fleuve Empire. This order not only determined guardian spirits and divine blessings for newborns, but also hunted down heretics and evil spirits. Salomon accused Pharma of being an evil spirit in disguise. Pharma denied it, insisting he was human. But Salomon didn't believe him. He ordered his men to set up a sealing barrier, which Pharma easily broke. Even as Pharma tried to reason with them, the Inquisitors launched attacks, all of which he deflected with ease. Seeing Pharma's overwhelming power, Salomon gave the order to kill him. At first, Pharma didn't want to fight back, but when they refused to stop, he finally used his strength, knocking Salomon off his horse. Suddenly, the god of medicine appeared in Pharma's likeness, declaring that Pharma had not come to fight, but to heal. At that moment, the Inquisitors saw the divine crest on Pharma's arm, proof of a god's power. They realized the boy before them was no demon, but an incarnation of the medicine god himself. Shocked, they dropped to their knees in worship. Salomon, ashamed, begged for punishment. Gravely injured from his fall, he offered his own life to atone. But Pharma, returning to his human form, stopped him. He insisted Salomon live on and simply promised not to interfere with him or his pharmacy again. Using his divine eye, Pharma examined Salomon's leg, which was fractured and bleeding. He performed surgery, administering antibiotics, applying anesthesia, cleaning the wound, removing dead tissue, stitching, and bandaging it. Salomon and his men swore to keep everything secret. Grateful Pharma had spared and even saved them. Months later, Salomon himself visited Pharma's pharmacy, this time as the newly appointed archbishop. He thanked Pharma and offered him gifts. He also reassured Pharma that he had sent a report declaring there was no such thing as a shadowless boy in San Fleuve, removing all suspicion. As a gesture of apology, Salomon presented Pharma with the staff of the medicine god, a sacred relic said to both diagnose and heal. When Pharma held it, the staff glowed, recognizing him as its rightful wielder. Curious, he asked Eleanor to try, but she couldn't even touch it. Salomon explained, the staff wasn't of this world, and only the god's vessel could wield it. Even Pharma was stunned when the staff levitated with his divine energy. Before leaving, Salomon also gave Pharma a protective charm, a seal that would let him cast a shadow under the sun, hiding his unnatural trait. Overjoyed, Pharma realized he could now walk openly with Blanche and Lotta without drawing fear. Meanwhile, his pharmacy was busier than ever, and he needed more staff. But finding skilled noble pharmacists was difficult, and commoner pharmacists were bound by the guild led by Veron, making recruitment nearly impossible. While observing another pharmacy, Pharma overheard a manager named Pieri explaining to a frustrated customer that they couldn't sell the same medicine as Pharma's shop because the guild hadn't approved it. Pharma decided then he would establish a new pharmaceutical compounding association, allowing other pharmacies to distribute his new formulas. Eleanor pointed out that since he already had a subsidiary company, Medique, he met the requirements. If the association was approved, more pharmacies could join and ease the burden on his own store. But just as Pharma began preparing the documents, tragedy struck elsewhere. In one household, a little girl named Mary lay on the verge of death after taking medicine. A few days later, Veron grew furious as the Otherworld pharmacy kept thriving, attracting more and more people. He claimed this couldn't continue, since the medicine there was so cheap that even the poor could afford it. Some suspected that Pharma was relying on divine arts, or on the wealth and prestige of his father, the world-renowned royal court pharmacist, and even the queen herself. Whispers spread that Veron might be the mastermind behind the carriage attack on the pharmacy. When pressed, a member named Sam admitted that Veron had already shown anger before the pharmacy even opened. At a meeting, Veron declared that the Otherworld pharmacy was nothing but trouble and had to be eliminated. He forbade all members of his guild from doing business with them. Anyone who disobeyed would be expelled and stripped of their license. Meanwhile, Pierre, a commoner pharmacist, carried his sick daughter Mary to a clinic, only to find it closed until next week. By chance, Pharma passed by and saw Mary's dire condition. He offered to help, but Pierre, noticing the royal court badge on him, hesitated. Pharma calmly introduced himself as the owner of the Otherworld pharmacy and begged to check on Mary. At first, Pierre refused, but with Mary burning with fever and suffering seizures, he finally agreed. Pharma brought them in through the back door to avoid spreading illness. In the clinic room, he wore a mask and gave one to Pierre, explaining it was for protection against infection. He examined Mary carefully. High fever, dehydration, weakness. He confirmed she'd had seizures lasting 2 to 3 minutes. Using precise weighing and his divine eye, Pharma diagnosed her with a severe flu infection caused by a virus, not an evil spirit, as many believed. He prescribed an inhaled medicine so it would act directly on her airways, where the virus spread. He also gave paracetamol to reduce the fever, warning that while fever helps fight disease, prolonged fever could drain her strength. That very night, Mary's fever dropped. Pierre was astonished and deeply grateful. When he asked about the fee, Pharma only asked for a loaf of bread. Pierre was stunned at the low price, but Pharma explained simply, children deserved affordable treatment. At home, Pierre's wife was shocked he had accepted medicine from a noble's pharmacy against guild rules. But Pierre insisted, without Pharma, Mary would not have survived. He admitted that Pharma's knowledge and compassion were what defined a true pharmacist. The next day, during a guild meeting, Veron raged again over declining sales. They discussed how Pharma's pharmacy had opened a cosmetics branch and was preparing a third. To their frustration, even noble ladies and the newly appointed high priest were buying from him. When asked, Pierre finally spoke up. He revealed that Pharma had saved his daughter's life and treated everyone equally, regardless of status. He urged them to see for themselves rather than cling to rumors. Veron exploded, accusing Pharma of abusing the queen's authority and calling him a trickster noble. He bitterly recalled losing his own daughter years ago because he couldn't afford the overpriced medicine controlled by nobles. His hatred only deepened. He warned that if the Otherworld pharmacy continued, the entire healthcare system for commoners would collapse. The guild had to destroy it, but Pierre held firm. Pharmacists shouldn't deceive patients with ineffective remedies. They should learn from Pharma instead of trying to erase him. Veron, losing patience, told Pierre to leave the guild if he disagreed. The next day, Pierre sat sadly outside his shuttered shop, his license revoked. Passing by, Pharma recognized him and stopped. Hearing his story, Pharma felt guilty, but Pierre smiled faintly, admitting he admired Pharma's pharmacy so much he wanted to change. Yet, cast out by the guild, he considered leaving the country to start over. Pharma quickly invited him to join the newly formed Compounding Pharmacists Association, where true medicine could be shared. Pierre gladly agreed. Soon after, he reopened his own shop in partnership with the Otherworld Pharmacy. On opening day, he worried no one would come. But to his surprise, a long line of customers had gathered, excited to buy medicine from the very first store officially allied with Pharma. Seeing the crowd, Pierre broke down in tears of joy. The scene opens in the past, where a genius physician named Camus stands trial. The judges could hardly believe that this man, who brought so many medical innovations, had also carried out horrific human experiments. A young Bruno was present back then, shocked to hear Camus declare, "No matter how many medicines you invent, humans will still die. And even if many perish, new ones will be born. In the end, Camus was punished for his cruelty. Bruno wakes from this memory. It was only a dream. At breakfast, Pharma notices his father's unease, but Bruno brushes it off. Soon after, Simon arrives with a letter from Blease, the eldest son of the family. Beatrice is excited, thinking her son will return soon. But the letter reveals otherwise. Blease has decided to postpone his return. Blanche asks sadly if her brother is too busy, and Pharma gently explains that Blease must be focused on finishing his studies. Later, Bruno summons Pharma and warns him about the coming St. Fleuve Fair, the Empire's largest annual trade event. Merchants from across the world will gather in the capital. But there is grim news. A strange plague has broken out on the colony island of Vante under Nederland's rule. According to Blease's report, over 1,000 have already died. 2 top researchers from Nova Leon University were also infected and perished within days. All bodies and samples were destroyed with fire magic to prevent the spread. Even the world's best scholars admitted defeat. In his letter, Blaise described the victims: high fever, headache, vomiting, swollen lumps in the neck and armpits, coma, then death within a week. Another researcher's body blackened before he died even faster. The island was sealed off. Hearing this, Pharma realizes the truth. This is none other than the Black Death, the plague that once devastated Europe. Bruno agrees, recalling historical records. It wiped out half of Europe's population in the 14th century, with mortality rates between 50 and 70%. If it spread to the lungs, death was certain. Pharma calls it humanity's worst nightmare, a disease that can resurface even after being eradicated. The danger is real. A Nederland trade ship from Vante is heading to Mosserier, the de Medicis family's port. Pharma quickly instructs Eleanor to send word to Governor Adam to prepare a quarantine facility and isolate any sailor showing symptoms. Bleise's sketches of the bacteria confirm Pharma's fears. He prepares the antibiotic levofloxacin strong enough to fight the plague. Enough doses are being produced for 1,000 patients, ready to distribute free of charge at quarantine stations. Together with Bruno and Eleanor, Pharma presents his plan to the Queen. After listening, she orders partial closure of the capital's gates, sets up checkpoints, and publicly announces measures: exterminate rats, destroy fleas, and boil clothing to cut off transmission. Though risky, the Queen insists the St. Fleuve Fair must proceed to uphold the Empire's dignity, but with maximum security and purification spells from the Church. Meanwhile, Pharma teaches Pierre to use the microscope safely and prepares stockpiles of medicine. He reminds him that if the infection reaches the lungs, it will spread by droplets at terrifying speed. Every dose must reach those in need immediately. At the palace, ministers report that thanks to Otherworld Pharmacy and the Compounding Guild, mortality in the capital has already dropped by 20%. Some praise the achievements, saying if replicated across the land, the Empire's prosperity would be unshakable. The Queen smirks. These same ministers once dismissed Pharma as just a boy. She even considers granting him the title of Grand Duke, but the law forbids minors from receiving it. Still, she vows to provide Pharma every resource he needs to continue his research. But while preparations intensify, far away, a shadow looms. The dark figure of Camus, once punished for his sins, reappears cloaked in black mist. He passes by lifeless bodies, and under his feet, rats scurry restlessly. Not long after, Pharma and Eleanor finally arrived at Mosserier port. Pharma asked her to inspect every ship before the Grand Fair began. Eleanor's apprentices reported that all foreign vessels had already been checked as instructed, handing over lists of cargo and health records for each crew. Once cleared, the ships would undergo purification with holy wind magic before unloading. Anyone who tested negative but had suspicious contact was immediately sent to quarantine. Using a small boat, Pharma and Eleanor boarded an incoming vessel. They examined every crew member carefully. One impatient captain complained, demanding to unload his goods. Pharma apologized and explained the inspection was vital to prevent an outbreak. After finishing, he asked the captain to submit results at the checkpoint and prescribe vitamins for sailors showing early symptoms, instructing them to take them at the quarantine station. Moving on to other ships, Pharma encountered 2 captains bickering, each demanding to be inspected first. Frustrated, they sneered at taking orders from a mere boy, afraid their goods would spoil. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed from the Red Fleet warship of St. Fleuve. Its captain Demey appeared, warning that all ships in Imperial waters must obey the rules. He declared that Pharma was a royal pharmacist and son of Mosere's lord, with full authority. Demey threatened to fire cannons at anyone who resisted. Terrified, the captains quickly apologized. Pharma boarded the Red Fleet to thank him, and Demey promised his crew would support inspections at the port. Later at the checkpoint, Eleanor sighed in relief. Admitting she once thought the Black Death was just a legend, she was grateful Pharma was here. Then Governor Adam rushed in with grim news. Villagers in Aote, a small fishing town west of Mosire, were dying of high fever. The village was a hotspot for smugglers avoiding inspections. Shocked, Eleanor asked where the foreigners had gone, but Adam said they had already left. At first, the illness looked like a common fever, but soon deaths multiplied, spreading rapidly. Determined, Pharma donned protective gear and set out immediately. Eleanor insisted on following, but Pharma reassured her she could handle the port with its medical facilities, supplies, and trained staff. Then he mounted his staff and flew toward the village. Along the way, he reasoned the source was likely a rat hidden in smuggled goods. Unless the ship was found and cleansed, its crew would perish. Distracted, Pharma accidentally slammed into a tree, but miraculously passed right through. Refocusing, he flew faster, determined to reach the village before more lives were lost. From above, he saw terrified villagers fleeing, believing evil spirits had cursed their home. When Pharma landed, they mistook him for one of those spirits and even raised weapons against him. Calmly, he told them they wouldn't survive if the source wasn't eliminated, even if they fled. When they refused to listen, Pharma struck his staff into the ground, sealing the village with a wall of ice to stop the spread. He then introduced himself as the royal pharmacist who had healed the queen, showing his insignia. Finally, he promised he had brought medicine to save them. Convinced, the villagers returned and agreed to cooperate. Pharma explained the village would be divided into 3 zones, one for severe patients, one for mild cases or those exposed, and one for the healthy. This way, treatment could be prioritized and the infection contained. Meanwhile, the Red Fleet spotted a suspicious ship drifting off course. Demey suspected smugglers. Through a spyglass, sailors saw the entire crew already dead. Some wanted to investigate, but Demey refused, calling it too dangerous. He ordered the vessel sunk immediately, ensuring no wreckage could wash ashore. Better to destroy it than risk spreading a plague deadlier than pirates. Back in Aotat, the first round of medicine was distributed. Villagers rejoiced, though the sickest patients still needed urgent care. Pharma planned to visit them the next day. Local pharmacists offered to accompany him, but he refused, reminding them to prioritize their own safety. With protective gear, Pharma assured them he could handle the most critical cases. The next morning, Pharma entered the isolation zone, ready to face the most severe patients. The scene opens at a medical academy where 2 young men, Jack and Edie, are complaining that they don't have enough time or energy to finish their work. Jack suggests asking the headmaster for more staff. Just then, Professor Cato overhears and offers to help, but they reject her coldly. She looks dejected as her attempt to assist is brushed aside. Later, in her office, Professor Cato sits reading a book with special glasses. A female student comes to comfort her, knowing what just happened. The professor admits she'll be 60 next year and feels it's natural for people to avoid help from an old woman close to retirement. She explains that her specialty is in fungi and microorganisms, not drug formulation. The girl insists she has contributed greatly to pharmaceutical research. Suddenly, someone arrives to inform her the headmaster has summoned her, making her fear she might be forced into early retirement. Meanwhile, in Eotat village, Pharma enters a building where patients with severe plague symptoms are gathered. A masked medic blocks his way, assuming he's just a child. Another quickly corrects him, explaining this is no ordinary boy. It's the royal pharmacist. The man, once a subordinate of Salomon, steps forward and greets Pharma with respect. After Pharma explains he came to treat the sick, he is allowed inside. The number of patients is overwhelming. Pharma realizes it's nearly impossible to distinguish between those truly infected and those who are not. Doubt crosses his mind. Could his medical knowledge and the drug he developed, levofloxacin, really be enough? Still, he pushes forward, instructing the medics to give medicine to all patients, while he uses his divine eye to examine each one. The results: 12 confirmed plague cases, 2 patients with simple influenza, and 1 already deceased. For the 12 infected, he administers levofloxacin, watching as the infection begins to recede, raising their chances of survival. He points out that 1 patient only has the flu, not the plague, and after taking medicine and changing clothes, the man can leave the quarantine once a short isolation period is over. To further boost recovery, pharma channels divine power into the drugs. Even so, he sees clearly. There aren't enough medical staff to handle this crisis. Gazing out toward the church turned into a plague ward, pharma realizes this epidemic has already gone beyond ordinary medicine. Later, medics report the medicine has been distributed and ask what else they can do. Pharma immediately remembers the merchant ship heading for the capital carrying infected crew. He orders them to find the sailors, burn contaminated cargo, and treat survivors with the drug. He himself will follow after finishing treatment here. The story shifts back to the academy, where Professor Cato meets the headmaster, revealed to be Bruno. She pleads not to have her research cut short, but Bruno denies that's his intention. Instead, he wants to entrust her with a mission to help save the world. Shocked, she insists she isn't capable, but Bruno explains the task falls directly within her expertise. He wants her to discover a microorganism that could yield compounds to treat the plague and other infectious diseases. Looking at the documents he provides, she's astonished. There are detailed notes on microorganisms she herself cultivated years ago. Actinobacteria. Bruno praises her findings and immediately grants her a special budget to focus solely on developing new medicine. From that day, her retirement is postponed. Once dismissed by others, she now stands as an essential researcher, just like Pharma, though, unlike him, she is a native of this world, armed with her own skills and tools. Back in Aotat, villagers thank Pharma and the clerics for returning after treating the severely ill. Pharma urges them to remain inside the frozen barrier for 2 weeks to ensure safety. He instructs them to kill rats and fleas on sight, and never to touch animals if they must leave the village. Not long after, smoke rises from the camp where the smuggler sailors are holed up, abandoned by their own. Pharma questions them about their cargo. At first they refuse, until he warns they'll die without medicine. Finally, they reveal the goods: 2 carts of cloth, 1 of spices, and 1 carrying rare white squirrels from Vante Island. Pharma immediately suspects these rodents are carriers of the plague. Worse, the smugglers admit that among them were 5 holy knights, divine warriors serving nobles, heightening Pharma's suspicion that this is a deliberate plot to unleash plague in the capital, just like the White Death incident. After their confession, the smugglers receive medicine, but Pharma orders them handed over to the Empire once recovered for trial. At the royal palace, Bruno briefs the queen. An illegal ship entered Mosire, spreading plague in Aota village, killing many. The queen commands heightened security at every gate, especially Gate 6, the main route from Mosire. The next day, Lotta distributes masks to citizens, while an officer delivers a sample from Gate 6 to Pierre. Upon inspection, Pierre immediately identifies plague bacteria exactly as Pharma had warned. He urgently orders quarantine of all new arrivals, but suddenly an explosion rocks the gate. A suspected holy knight has blown it open, unleashing caged white squirrels with a spell of wind. The checkpoint collapses into chaos. Realizing the danger, Pierre shouts for the alarm bells, ordering every home and shop sealed shut to keep the infected animals from spreading. Meanwhile, the queen receives a report that a group of holy knights from Nederla has attacked the capital. To her surprise, there are only 5 of them. She immediately orders the royal army to defeat them. Still, Nederla has long been an ally, so why would they send smugglers carrying the Black Death? Bruno steps forward and warns that a smuggler ship from Nederla could be carrying the plague. He even urges the queen to take the newly developed medicine as a precaution. Yet, the true purpose of Nederla's move remains unclear. Bruno suspects that someone with deep knowledge of the plague must be pulling the strings, because such a scheme couldn't work otherwise. He recalls that 3 years ago, Nederla recruited a mysterious pharmacist. His methods resembled someone Bruno once knew too well. That man was none other than Camus, Bruno's former colleague. A genius pharmacist, yes, but infamous for his cruel human experiments. Eventually, the Banacti Church stripped him of his powers and exiled him as a commoner. Before that, however, Camus had already been experimenting on prisoners, trying to create toxins that spread like a plague. Some ministers even suspect he was behind the death of the previous king. Bruno admits he has always hated this man. At Gate 6, the royal army struggles against the Holy Knights until Salomon arrives and seals their powers with divine magic. Elsewhere, Lota tries to bring medicine to the pharmacy, but Cedric stops her, warning it's too dangerous. Just then, she sees Pharma returning from Mosire. Pharma quickly reports to Bruno that Eleanor is handling the inspections at the port. Together, they interrogate the exhausted knights. Shockingly, the five confess they were only following the orders of a mysterious man they didn't even know by name. They had no knowledge of the plague. One knight explains that the man had taken citizens hostage and wielded power as if possessed by an evil spirit. With this information, Bruno and Pharma finally piece it together. The mastermind is Camus. Before dying, the knights whisper that their mission is complete, and the people will now be safe. Back at the pharmacy, Lotta hurries inside, thinking all is well. Pharma also heads there, but suddenly spots a dark presence inside his lab. He rushes forward. Unaware of the danger, Lotta enters, with Cedric trailing behind. The unlocked door raises Cedric's suspicions, but before he can act, Camus appears and paralyzes him. Pharma arrives just in time, using his divine eye to confirm the intruder's identity. It is indeed Camus, waiting in the lab. Bruno and Pharma confront him, only to find Cedric and Lot unconscious on the floor. Bruno tells Pharma to heal them while he faces Camus himself. A fierce battle erupts between Bruno and Camus. Pharma, meanwhile, works frantically to remove the poison from Cedric and Lotta. Once they recover, he races after his father, furious at Camus for his twisted experiments and for spreading the Black Death. Channeling his full divine power, Pharma unleashes the might of the medicine god. In the end, Camus is destroyed, his body hurled out of the pharmacy. A brilliant light bursts from the building, witnessed by all. Salomon, watching from afar, wonders aloud, could this be the legendary purifying light of the medicine god? According to ancient records, the medicine god could banish evil spirits and cleanse plagues with his staff. After the battle, containment and treatment of the plague continue. Thanks to Eleanor's strict inspections at Mosire, no further infections spread through the port. Pharma produces additional doses of levofloxacin, ensuring supplies for the capital. Slowly, recovery begins and the threat of the Black Death fades away. At the Royal Medical School, researchers discover bacteria that produce streptomycin, paving the way for new antibiotics. Work on vaccines for various infectious diseases also moves forward. 2 months later, the Queen officially announces that the Black Death threat is over. The citizens rejoice. The Otherworld Pharmacy reopens its doors, and long lines of people eagerly wait outside to receive their medicine. The price of selling yourself to work can sometimes be this tragic. A young pharmacist named Kanji Yakutani spent his life in the laboratory of molecular pharmacology. His motivation came from a painful past. His little sister had died from a brain tumor that could not be completely removed. Carrying that loss, Kanji devoted himself to research, determined to save patients who shared the same fate. But even scientists are only human. After endless hours of work, he set his alarm and closed his eyes for a quick nap. When the alarm rang, Kanji never woke up again. He had died from overwork. When he opened his eyes once more, he found himself in another world. Standing before him was a maid named Charlotte Soller, or simply Lotta. She called him young master and told him to rest after being struck by lightning. Looking at his body, Kanji realized he had been reborn into a boy named Pharma de Medicis. Lotta introduced herself again and helped him remove the bandages. On his arm was a strange mark resembling the holy crest of the medicine god Dionysus, also known as the god of healing. Pharma dismissed it, claiming it was only a burn from lightning. Lotta then explained that she served the de Medicis family, one of the most prestigious noble houses of the Saint-Fleuve Empire, known for serving as royal pharmacists for centuries. Pharma's father, Bruno de Medicis, was a duke and the headmaster of the Royal Pharmacy School. His mother's name was Beatrice, his younger sister Blanche, and his older brother Blolly studied far away at Nova Live University, the most prestigious academy in the world. Bruno expected his children not only to master pharmacy, but also to wield divine arts, a type of magic believed to be a gift from the gods. Yet, along with his memory loss, Pharma seemed to have forgotten his water element, divine arts. Lotta was shocked, since Pharma had once been very skilled. She warned that without divine arts he could be stripped of his title and expelled from the family. Pharma returned to his room and tried to practice. The mark on his arm glowed. He created water from his hand, but could not stop it until he accidentally spoke the words, "Stop." Later, he discovered that his left hand could create compounds, while his right hand could erase them, as long as he understood their chemical structure. At the family library, Lotta reminded him that he had memorized every book since childhood. Under his father's orders, Pharma tried to recover his memories while reading. That evening, at the family dinner, Bruno tested him by asking how to make a healing ointment called Giorid. Thanks to Lotta's warning, Pharma answered correctly, easing his father's worries. Relieved, Bruno told him he would resume lessons with his tutor, Eleanor, a brilliant former student of his. The next day, Eleanor noticed that Pharma now addressed her more formally, unlike before. After hearing about the lightning strike and memory loss, she understood. That day, she began teaching him divine arts. She explained that nobles are born with innate talents and guardian deities. Both Bruno and Blali were blessed by the medicine god, and so was Pharma. Eleanor, however, was blessed by the water god. She described the 5 elemental attributes: fire, water, wind, earth, and non-elemental, each divided into yin and yang. Pharma asked if someone could use an element outside their natural affinity. She replied, no, that was impossible, unless one was a god or a monster. Pharma was stunned. By the lake, Eleanor noticed Pharma lacked a holy staff, an item that amplifies divine arts. She lent him hers and demonstrated how to form a water spear. When Pharma tried, his power far exceeded hers, and he did so without chanting. Shocked, Eleanor tested his strength with a magic measuring rod, but it shattered instantly. Unable to gauge his power, even the staff could not identify whether his element was yin or yang. Eleanor examined him closely and saw the holy crest of the medicine god on his arm. Stunned, she warned him never to reveal this, not even to his father. Pharma promised to keep it secret. On their way back, they rested on a bench. Pharma playfully suggested Eleanor make a telescope with her fingers, and surprisingly, she saw more clearly. When Pharma tried the same, he noticed her sprained finger glowing green. As he analyzed it, the glow turned white. He explained that he could see illnesses in green, and when he focused on the cause, it turned white. Eleanor was shaken, realizing this ability resembled the divine eye of the medicine god, a power said to belong only to the gods. Then came the most terrifying discovery. Eleanor looked down and realized that Pharma had no shadow. Horrified, she fled, leaving the boy alone. The next morning at the mansion, Bruno told Pharma that Eleanor had requested to stop tutoring him due to a high fever and even wanted to quit altogether. Surprised by this decision, Bruno asked Pharma if he knew the reason. Pharma said he didn't, though deep down he remembered how she had been shocked and fled the day before. Bruno then handed him medicine and a letter, asking him to deliver them to Eleanor. Before leaving, Pharma examined the formula his father had written. Realizing it was no more than a simple nutritional drink, he adjusted it into something more effective. When he arrived, he gave Eleanor the letter, along with his improved fever remedy and an ointment for her sprained finger. Still shaken, she feared it might be poison, since she knew his secret. Pharma reassured her, saying he wanted her to remain his tutor. Eleanor was shocked, believing he no longer needed to study because he was the very embodiment of the medicine god. But after hearing Pharma explain that the family library contained nothing about divine arts and that he needed her guidance to control his powers, she finally agreed to return. The next day, Eleanor had recovered. Before beginning the lesson, she thanked Pharma, admitting his bitter medicine and ointment had worked wonders, much better than Bruno's prescription. She then took Pharma to an uninhabited island for training, in case his powers spiraled out of control. As expected, Pharma's strength far exceeded anyone's imagination. Though he still struggled to control it, Eleanor persisted in guiding him, determined to help him master his abilities. When Pharma returned home, he was greeted by the maid Madeline. With his divine eye, he immediately saw she was suffering from acid reflux. Looking around, he realized nearly all the servants had health problems. Whispering to himself, Pharma admitted his existence was strange. no shadow, divine powers far beyond normal humans, making him an easy target for kidnapping or assassination. Yet instead of retreating, he began preparing medicines for them one by one. After finishing, he gave a bottle to Lotta and explained how to use it. She was delighted, planning to share it with her mother, whose skin had grown rough from constant contact with water. Pharma then crafted remedies for each servant based on their conditions. When Madeline received hers, she broke down in tears, thanking him since no servant had ever been given medicine before. Lotta explained that Bruno, as a noble pharmacist, only served the aristocracy and never cared for household staff. Hearing this, Pharma was disheartened, realizing that social status decided who received treatment. He vowed to provide medicine to everyone in need, no matter their rank. A few days later, Pharma noticed his little sister Blanche absent from dinner. It turned out she had caught chickenpox, and Bruno ordered everyone to stay away from her for 3 weeks. Soon after, he left for urgent business, coughing and clearly unwell himself. That night, Pharma sneaked into Blanche's room. Frightened, she warned that their father would scold them, but Pharma reassured her and offered medicine. She refused at first, saying it was too bitter, so Pharma cleverly mixed it with a macaron for her to eat. Blanche was shocked. Her father had told her there was no cure. Pharma explained that the remedy was written in a new medical text, but their father was likely too busy to read it yet. He asked her to keep it secret and warned her not to scratch her skin, or the illness could spread. When Blanche asked, "What is a virus?" Pharma described it as tiny, invisible evil spirits. She then remarked that her brother had truly changed. Before, he never cared for her or played with her. Now, she had come to love this new brother deeply. Pharma stayed silent, remembering his late sister from his